Welcome, everybody, to
Why am
another
I like,
episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast. I am your co host, somewhat flying solo today. I don't have Jamie, as I think he's vacationing in like the Hamptons or somewhere up in that area. But I do have a special guest. I have somebody from the West Coast who got up bright and early this morning, Lauren Wells from Rincon Partners. Lauren, how are you today?
good? Had my cup of coffee, so that's all that matters.
Yeah. So for those listening, I just have to state this that Lauren got up at 4:30 in the morning to record this episode, but there's also a reason behind it is because Lauren also has a very busy life, like most of us as note investors. But Lauren, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself and what keeps you busy during the day as well?
Yeah, so my name's Lauren. I'm, you know, a new note investor and new mom as well, second time new mom. So I feel like it's not as difficult this time because hindsight, you realize the babies don't really do much, but they need just to eat and have their diaper changed. And I have a 3-year-old toddler who really gives me a run for my money. So yeah, that keeps me pretty busy. But you say like, oh, I'm so busy, but then I'm looking at you. You have like a million things going on. So I feel like whenever we talk, I'm like, well, man, I should be doing more. I need to like fill my day, even though I already feel like there's not enough hours in the day. So yeah, 4:30 a.m. works for me because both kids are. I can almost guarantee, knock on wood, I say that as I'm sure that one of them will wake up today. Most of the time they are sleeping still,
So,
so
well,
it's a
yeah, I was going to jump in
no go.
because, well, you mentioned like I'm really busy and stuff, but at least I can plan my day. So I can structure it how I want. When you've got kids, and I have kids as well, mine are older, but when they're at that age, I mean, you're at their beck and call. You could be in the middle of something, and then if one of your children are hungry, they ain't stopping until you feed them or whatever the case may be.
True.
So I'd say your day is probably more hectic and crazy is mine, and it's more challenging just because of the simple fact that you can't plan anything accordingly. So
Yeah, I mean it's just different.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about note investing. When did you start? I'll say like studying or researching or learning about notes. How long ago?
Yeah. So about a year, March, like right after COVID
Okay.
started, right after quarantine, right after we all went into lockdown.
Okay.
Um, I started reading, doing all the reading. So from like March, April until about June, July, it was just a lot of reading. Like I think next to my bedside table, next to my bed, I have probably 20 books
Okay.
that I read.
Okay.
Um,
What are your favorite?
yeah. Um, oh gosh, I'm so bad. Invest in debt.
Okay. Jim Rapier. Yeah.
Um, yes, and then I can't remember the name of another one, the other one that I really like, but it's by Josh Andrews, I think.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Paper. I forget. Yeah.
Um, Paper
Paper
Profit.
profits.
No.
Yep. Is that paper
Yes.
profit? Yep.
Um, for because that was the first time I was introduced to the like using the calculator and like the equations behind it. So it broke it down really simply, and so that was a big takeaway for me from that book.
So.
Someone who literally has zero background in real estate before March of
Okay.
last year.
So you
So
had no experience in real estate, so that's interesting. By the way, have you gotten the book that I told you to order, and have you looked at it at all?
I did buy it. We're going on vacation on Friday, and my intention is to take it with me and not read it on the plane because when you have two kids in tow, that's just like not going to happen. But we will have grandparents helping on vacation, so I have full intentions of reading it then. I didn't realize it was going to be a textbook, like a
Yeah.
school textbook. So I'm glad that we talked about what chapters are most pertinent because, I mean, while I would love to say I would have time to read all 700 pages, probably would not get done anytime soon.
And the challenge with it too is
So,
it's not 700 pages of easy reading. It's 700 pages of like
no,
you have to understand it to get to the next section. So it's not like a book where you can read a page a minute, whatever it is. You're gonna read it and then get the next page and be like, "What was that again?" and flip back. So
Exactly. I'm going to have my like highlighter out, probably highlighting everything.
Yeah.
That's how it usually goes. You're like, I'm just going to highlight the important things, and then you end up highlighting the whole page.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's just me.
I don't read much, so I don't highlight a lot. So you started last March, and you've gotten off, I'd say, to a pretty fast start, though, because you have how many notes right now?
15. And I did write that down before we got on the phone. I was like, I should probably know this. Yes,
Okay.
15, mix of first and seconds.
Oh, so you dipped into both. So I didn't realizing that
Yes,
you dipped into. So what'd you buy first, the first or the seconds?
the seconds. Yeah.
Because they're cheaper?
So, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and I felt like if it would be a good step into, okay, do I want to do this more? And then first, I feel like is more of they're more expensive, so it's more of a commitment.
Mm-hmm.
So,
so on the seconds, just rough ballpark, what do you think your average purchase price was on your seconds? Just out of curiosity.
Maybe like 4,000.
Okay, so I mean it's a low dollar value where people looking to get involved, because a lot of people always say, oh, you need 100,000 or 50,000 to get started. I mean, it's nice to have that, but if you wanted to pluck off your first note, you can start with a few $1,000, but you got to make sure you have money in reserves and so forth. But there are assets out there that you can buy for under 10,000. And case in point is you've got some of them. So, so on your, I want to just talk about seconds because I don't do too much in seconds, so I always kind of like to learn a little bit more about them. Were they ones that had equity in the first? Were the first paying? Was it a mix? Tell us a little bit more about some of the seconds.
So, made the mistake of not really looking for equity in the first two. And then other than the first two I bought, the rest of them do have equity. That's now just like, if I'm going into second position, they better have equity. Lesson learned. You don't really have much room to do anything if they don't. So most of them have that. The first are all paying. So just really the second isn't. So they're all non-performing. Yeah, so that's it. Another thing, I skipped performing completely and just went straight for non-performing. So like that's my personality, just like, let's do this.
So you come off as being somebody who, I'll use the term like aggressive.
Careful.
You're highly motivated, I guess. You're not, the patient side of things, a little bit similar. Like why I don't, my attorney laughs, and I mentioned this in the past episodes. My attorney laughs at me if I ever mention seconds because he's like, you have zero. He's like, don't do it. He's like, your patience level is like 0. He's like, seconds will drive you nuts because it's a patience and waiting game. Unless again the first is performing and then there's equity, then you could force a foreclosure. But in some instances that might not be the case. And do you want to spend the cost if the first is also going through foreclosure? But so I'm just curious, have you found now that you've done seconds and first, have you found one that you like more than the other, or do you just like them both because they're just two completely different animals and give you different perspectives on things?
Yeah, there's things I like about seconds, but definitely first. I will continue only with first. I mean, I would never say no. So a good deal is a good deal, but yeah, I would like to focus mostly just on first moving forward. I mean, yeah, it's the patience part of it, and then just you're in first position. Like I don't know what else to say other than that. Now it seems like, wait, why did I do seconds again? But
have any of your seconds paid off or reinstated, or have you gotten any payments from any of them, or how have those gone, or are you just still waiting?
No. So I up until about maybe 2 months ago, I had 5 notes. So it went from 5 to 15 in the last 2 months because we purchased, a lot of seconds and a few firsts all at the same time. So none of those 5 have been that I had prior to 2 months ago that were seconds had been performing or nothing has happened with them. I just started foreclosure on 2 of them because they do have equity in the second. So I figured let's send that demand letter and get things going.
Okay. And what states are these in?
Everywhere.
Okay.
Oh man. So Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Ohio, Nevada. I want to do that again. Yeah, all over. I tend to stay away from New York and New Jersey, not for any reason other than everyone seems to have a horror story.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like I have fear of those and the long foreclosure process and timing and everything. So
is there one state right now you've preferred over others at all? Or are they all
well, we
just
were
headaches?
talking about this. I thought I liked Florida, but I think I said that, and then a week later, I had one that was going to auction. The auction was scheduled. The sale date was going to be like, a Wednesday, and Tuesday night, the borrower filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And I was like, oh, and then, I think a week earlier than that, I'm sending a demand letter to someone in Florida, and we didn't have the complete pay history. So I thought I liked Florida, but maybe not.
So the one that in Florida filed was a first position, correct? Were you in first or second?
Yes.
Okay.
The first.
So
the bankruptcy.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that because it's your first bankruptcy. It's Chapter 7 versus 13, which is a little.
It's my second bankruptcy.
Oh, it is. Okay.
The 13. I have a Chapter 13 in Alabama.
Okay. So let's talk about
really diving right in.
Yeah. So let's talk about both. Well, I'll be honest. Bankruptcies, to get the experience of bankruptcies early on, I think is extremely beneficial. One of the first notes I bought was in bankruptcy because I just wanted to learn the process. And, me being somebody who likes to find anything on the internet, Pacer's just like, Pacer's like my dream. It's everything's there. We can learn everything about the borrower and so forth and, find out, how much they make, every bill they have. It's pretty interesting as part of a due diligence someone's in there. So you've got an Alabama Chapter 13 and a Florida Chapter 7. So what stage is the Chapter 13 in Alabama? Have you gone through submitting your proof of claim yet?
Yeah. So the borrower has had her plan since 2018 and hasn't made a single payment. So when we took over the loan back in April, we immediately filed a motion for relief and stay. And I'm like learning everything as I go, and so my question to the lawyer is always like, what's next? Do you need anything from me? Tell me what you need from me to move forward. And he's been great. So, we filed that. Before the hearing, we came to kind of an agreement that they would start making current payments as of July 11th. So here we're coming up, like we'll see how this goes. As of July 11th, and then they would also have a plan to pay all of the arrears at the same time to catch up. So they have essentially 2 payments they'll be making come July 11th should be the first payment. And I laugh because she hasn't made any payments for 2 years, so I don't know. So the stay was the relief was conditionally granted by the judge based off of this. So if she doesn't make the payments come July 11th, she has 21 days to, come forward, or we can start the foreclosure process.
So one of the things that, for people listening, that you mentioned that I think is very important for investors, that you mentioned is you haven't gone through this process. So you kept asking the attorney, what do you need from me? What do you need from me? And that's very important because, the attorneys may think like, okay, you've done this a million times and so forth, and they're just waiting on you and don't even ask for something. Like for example, I was coaching my son's basketball game last night and I, told him to go do something, and I realized he, hadn't done it and hadn't been through that. So he didn't know what to do. And that's like, okay. And he didn't want to ask either. And I see that with investors a lot of times where they'll want something and or wanting to know what the process is, but they're afraid to ask. And from that sense, and it's very important to ask. I had a attorney last night email me something where we're getting a demand letter out on asset in Florida. And they asked for something. I'm like, I've never heard of this. What is this? And they're like, oh, well, it goes with this. And I'm like, I've never done that before. How do I get this to you? And they're like, well, who's your servicer? And I'm like, here. They're like, just send me their contact information. I'll take care of it. I'm like, thank you. Take care of it. And, you know, I may have to pay them an extra $100 or whatever it is. But it's, you know, you're constantly learning. And the key to move the ball rolling, especially for people who are newer, is constantly just checking on the attorneys. You know, and what I usually do is after a few weeks of something happening, hey, is there anything you need from me? Because it might be something that at least reminds them to check on the file to see if a hearing was scheduled, or just let them reply back, oh, nothing right now, but as an update, you know, here's what the next scheduled hearing is, or something along those lines. So what do you think the outcomes that one's going to be? You think you're going to get a big fat check on July 11th?
Definitely not.
Oh, no.
I think the total payment should be like $1,800 a month.
Okay.
I mean, no.
So how much does she have to come up with?
The one payment of $800 and the other payment is, so it's not $1,800 a month. It's like, and the other payment of $500, I believe.
Okay.
So,
well, if you do, just remember that's a week before my birthday. So just, you know, you know, perfect timing for gifts.
Just forward the check.
Yeah, just forward the check.
I mean, at this point, the amount of information and time I've taken from you, I don't know if that would cover the cost.
No. So that's your 13. So let's go to, you know, because 13. I'll be honest, Florida's not one of my favorite states for investing. You know, I like Florida for Disney World, been there a million times, but for investing, and I know a lot of people like it because of equity appreciation in properties and so forth, but to foreclose in Florida, it's a bear. I mean, you have to have every I dotted and T crossed, and you've got one that I think it was, you know, tell the story, because this is interesting, because this went right up to the foreclosure sale, correct?
Yeah. So when we purchased it, I don't know if you know this, we purchased the assignment of judgment. So it had already, the sale date had already been scheduled.
Okay.
And like you said, one of the reasons I thought I liked Florida is because of the appreciation. I mean, they were hit pretty hard back in 2007, 2008, and I feel like they're still appreciating. And my second that I'm foreclosing on in Florida was one that didn't have equity and now has equity because of the appreciation. So, so it was scheduled for, the sale date was scheduled at, what was it, for like a week ago. And I think I texted you on the morning of, and I was like, well, she filed for bankruptcy last night. And for me, it was like, I woke up and that was, you know, you guys are 3 hours ahead. So I would feel like I'm catching up. I woke up and it was like, hey, the auction has been canceled. I don't know why. I'll let you know, like, from the attorney. And I've been working with the previous seller on this. And he's been great and kind of guiding me through. And the attorney reaches out and says, yes, the borrower filed at 7 p.m. last night for Chapter 7. So I'm literally on Google 5 seconds later, like, what can I do? I'm emailing the attorney, like, okay, tell me what the next steps are. Tell me what my options are. You know, what do the time frames look like? I always feel like, for me at least, I want to know how much time am I dealing with before the next step can happen overall? And then what actions can I take? What can't I do? Especially with bankruptcy, as far as like communication with the borrower, like what's allowed. So he emailed me back, and essentially I looked at Pacer already. I immediately, like you said, went to Pacer and was like, okay, what are the logistics behind, or what are the details behind this? And it did say that the filing was incomplete. She was missing a few documents or paperwork that was needed. So she has until the 8th of July to, correct the filing. And if not, then it can be dismissed. So essentially the lawyer was like, you can file the motion for release now, or you can wait until the 8th and see what happens. It's really a matter of like, do you want to spend the money now? And then the point might be moot because it might be just dismissed anyway.
Well, if it's a Chapter 7, so by the way, I have a bankruptcy from March of 2020 that we're still waiting to get the plan approved, and because they keep missing information. So when a borrower doesn't have an attorney, has a bad attorney, it's actually worse because it keeps stalling the process. But so one thing
I think that's the point, though, right?
Yes.
Isn't that their play?
So one thing I'll mention to check is in the Chapter 7, did they stipulate what they wanted to do with the property? Did they want to keep it or did they want to surrender it? That's important to note because what caught me a little off guard is when you mentioned to file a motion for relief on Chapter 7, because Chapter 7 is usually a quick process where the plan is approved and resolved in, like, call it 90 or 120 days. And at the end of it, they're wiped of their debt. So they don't owe you any money, but you still have the house secured. And then at that point in time, they either have to do at the end, they have to do one of two things: sign a reaffirmation agreement, which says, hey, even though my debt's wiped, I want to put it back on as debt. Or, if they don't, then there's no reason, I don't know why you do a motion for relief. It'd be a question for the attorney, because if the plans get approved and the debt's wiped, then you just go right to foreclosure because they don't owe the money and you just go after that property.
So I'm thinking it's because it was already scheduled for sale. So it'd be more about just rescheduling the sale date versus having to go through the foreclosure process all over again.
Yep. So
that might be it.
It gets dismissed, and then it's like it never happened, and then you just
I hope
the sale, and then what they'll probably do is file again, because I've had that happen. I've actually had a sale that went through, and then it got canceled after the sale because the borrower filed bankruptcy the morning of the sale. So
I'm just gonna pretend I didn't hear that.
Yeah. So which part? The fact that they might file again, or the fact that I've had them done sale, or both?
The fact that you've had it, yeah, both. But if I've learned anything, it's like when I first started reading, all the books, no investing seems like a fairly simple, straightforward process. Like the concept of it, seems like, oh yeah, like why wouldn't someone do this? Which is why I think a lot of people get caught up in, but that's like a topic for another time. And it's anything but. Like the state by state differences. There are so many things that I'm learning right when I feel like I've got a little bit of a grasp, and then realize I absolutely know nothing. So it's like in concept is like this concept of note investing. When you read all the books, seems like, oh yeah, duh. But then you get into it, and you really, I feel like the states, the minutia of it, the what's allowed, what's not allowed, what to look for, the things you don't even take into account that you should be looking for, like pay history. Didn't know that I would need the pay history all the way back from the last 5 servicers, or for the default date for, that's what I can collect on. So just, I feel like every day I'm learning a new nugget of information that is crucial.
Well, and that's one of the challenges, I think, and why I kind of temper people's expectations, because they'll go take a course over the weekend from somebody, and it's not that, and again, it may be a great course. I don't know. I'm not going to judge opinions on it, but I just don't believe anybody, after spending a weekend on something, could then be like, okay, I'm going to go run out and do it, because I've done it, you've done it now as well, and you realize right when you think you get to understand something, and again, the black and white's pretty easy. I mean, it's simple concept, note investing, but this whole arena is pretty much all gray, and there's so many curveballs that can be thrown at you that it's like, oh boy, now what do I do? And that's one of the reasons why I think building a solid network of people around you who you can go to besides your attorneys is important. Because one of the things that I've mentioned to people is, and you can probably appreciate this, and your kids are probably still a little bit too young, but I joke note investing to essentially being a chaperone on a 3rd grade field trip of students where you're the only chaperone and you went to the zoo. Basically it's like, okay, people, let's, everyone stick with me, and they do it for like 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden, oh, somebody sees the giraffe, someone sees the elephant, somebody sees the crocodiles, or whatever it may be, and they splinter off, and then it's like, okay, you're like, have to herd them back in like herding cats. Note investing is the same way with your attorneys, your servicers, your preservation companies, your bookkeeper, whoever it may be, as part of your team. So Would you agree with
Yeah,
that?
I would. I was thinking maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I was like, I'm not just investing in notes. It's also the processes, the business of it. Like, I mean, getting all of my systems and vendors and everything set up. It's not
Mhm.
just like, oh, I buy a note and I'm gonna take it from non-performing to performing, and then I'm gonna get a check in the mail every month. And like, if it was that simple, everyone would do it, right? Um, it
Mhm.
definitely. I think it's a lot. I was thinking about this last night. I feel like it's a lot like just parenting a toddler,
Yeah.
specifically a toddler.
Hmm.
Like, you got to keep your cool, which, like, you can't let your emotions as a parent get the best of you, which I feel like you definitely need to do in note
Yeah.
investing.
I'm not good at that.
Um, no, me either. You need to be super patient, which again is not one of my strengths. I'm learning,
I'm not good with that either.
and you need to get. This gives me hope. And you need to be super creative.
I'm good at that. That's
Like,
something. That's the one thing I'm good
you
at. I
are
can
good
get
at
creative.
that. You,
So.
yeah. Like, I think when I first, again, like, started, which wasn't that long ago, I had this idea of like, this is going to be my exit strategy.
Mhm.
Like, because everyone talks about that. Like, what's going to be your exit strategy? And like, yes, I have what I would like to do in an ideal world,
Mhm.
but that's never the case. So that's where, like, speaking with you and speaking with other people, there's so many different options and different
Mhm.
things that you can do and ways to work with the borrower. And if they're not, working with you, ways to go about it. And I guess I didn't, that's something I didn't know, and is another reason to have people to reach out to, I feel.
Yeah, it's challenging too in that sense because, like you said, you get to a fork in the road where the decision has to be made, and sometimes, you know, if you get aggressive and go after the borrower, sometimes then they can actually delay the process longer than trying to work with them. Like, and I'm saying that happened in this Chapter 7 case because they haven't paid in years and so forth. But I've found where early on that I'd have borrowers that get 4 or 5 months behind, then I'd start the legal process and so forth. And then if they filed a bankruptcy and stuff, it's like, and they wanted to work, in some instances, they wanted to work but
Mm-hmm.
wanted a lesser amount, but then they'd go dark or whatever case may be. I think I may have been a little, I don't say too aggressive, but I should have probably had a little more patience and waited to see what happened. Um, because it is interesting in that standpoint, and I don't know if you've ever played blackjack or not, but I view note investing a little bit like blackjack, where, if you've got, you know, 14 and the dealer's at 16, sometimes you just got to hold, but you want to play the odds, and think of what you would do in a situation. Hey, look, I got a house that has $100,000 in equity. I have a temporary loss of my job. And do you think, if I'm the lender, if I was in that borrower situation, what would I do? Well, I'd file foreclosure to protect my interest so I don't have to sell my house, move, and try and rent where rent's more expensive, or buy a house, which I can't because I'll have crap credit. Um, so what do? Well, you file bankruptcy. And I found now that I've gone through that more often now, I see people kind of do follow those odds more often than not, from that perspective, especially in today's economic environment where house prices are just through the roof everywhere. I've had a property that they wanted me to list for like $25,000. I said no, listed at 40, and I got offers in the mid 50s. So it's just, in this house, literally, is has no drywall in it. It's completely gutted. It's in an okay area. It just got some
Wow.
size, but there's no properties in that area. So all the fix and flippers are just chomping at the bit for it. Um,
Dang.
so I wanted to So you bought some notes from me as well. You bought 3 notes from me,
I
two in
have.
two in Ohio, one in North Carolina. Uh,
Yes.
so so let's talk about them. Hopefully, I don't have to edit this and you call me bad names. Uh, um, but the one in North Carolina, right? I think right at the time, when we sold that to you, the borrower pulled her stunts, or typical stunts, where it was non-performing, and then she reinstated. Has that borrower
Hmm.
continued to pay?
She has continued to pay. So she's made 2 payments, 1 payment since
Okay.
then, and our next one's due in a few days.
Okay.
So we'll see. They've been on time.
Okay. Good.
And yeah, so
Okay.
that one's cruising along. Really didn't have to do much there.
Okay.
Um, Thank you for that. And then the two in Ohio, I am gathering all the necessary information to. They were actually, and you helped me figure this out, HELOCs that moved from second into first because the
First.
first was paid off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, I look at those as a good thing because they obviously paid off the first. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they moved. I don't know what happened with the second, but
Yeah. A lot of times the borrower may have been deceased or they thought they paid it off. Uh, Quick question for you. Um, where are those boarded?
those
Okay.
are boarded at Madison.
Okay. Uh,
Yes.
so one thing that I would just ask you to check, and this is not a knock against Madison, is make sure that they have gone and recalculated the past interest. And some of the line of credits I've had with all servicers, this just isn't Madison. If the interest hasn't been paid in like 3 years, sometimes they haven't brought it forward. So,
Okay.
so just FYI, it's something. Line of credits for servicers on defaulted loans is really tricky because they have to, every time typically the interest rate gets adjusted by the feds, they have to they have to adjust it from there. And
Mm-hmm.
if they don't have proper software to do it, a lot of times they have to do it manually and so forth. So it can get a little time consuming, and sometimes it does get missed. I've had it missed by multiple servicers. So I'm just, again, not knocking Madison on this, but I just let everybody know, if you have a line of credits, make sure that when you look at it, the past interest is being accumulated for. The other thing that's really crazy about line of credits typically is when I ask for like a payoff and reinstatement, it's more, a line of credit's like a credit card. So it's almost like a credit card statement versus what you're traditionally used to seeing. It's my note and bolt for
Yeah,
the
I
day.
was looking. I was looking at actually that last night when I was trying to get reports for the attorney. So that's good to know. See, just another thing I would never have thought to check. Um, yeah, so those are, I'm sending out a demand letter to those. I think the situation there is like you said, one of the borrowers on one of the Ohio loans is deceased. The co-borrower is not.
Mm-hmm.
However, they are both of those loans. The borrowers are much older, and I don't believe live at the property.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a different mailing address.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks to you, I have all the systems to figure out where they are, and I think it's just a matter of getting the demand letter sent to the right address.
Okay. Have you checked if the properties are occupied?
They both are occupied.
Okay, so they've got somebody living there. Okay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, roll into kind of the last segment of this episode and talk. You've kind of mentioned this already throughout the episode, but I kind of just want to touch base on it a little more. So within note investing, what have you found to be simpler than you thought? What have you found to be more difficult than you thought? And if there is a system or process that you found to be valuable, what would that be? So those are three, but let's start with, what have you thought is been a little, when you got into this, be like, oh, this isn't as difficult as I thought it was? Could be nothing. So
Yeah, I don't think anything is like simpler than I thought it would be. I think things I've realized are the note investing community is really small.
yes.
It is, but it's really easy to ask questions and get feedback, and like a lot of people are willing to help. I've talked to like Matt Kelly, people are willing to lend knowledge. I mean, yes, most of the time, half the time. There's also like some training that people are trying to get you to buy, but yeah, I feel like those are the things I've realized. I don't know if anything has been super simple, but just because there's so much to learn that nothing really is like, oh, that's easy because I think it's easy. Usually I feel like it's because I'm missing something. So I don't really think anything's been necessarily like super simple
Well,
or easier than I thought.
in a sense, you kind of hit it nail on the head a little bit where finding information or getting somebody to provide feedback in other industries, because it's so competitive, it might be a little more difficult. Or you might get
Hmm.
people who, I'll say, troll others in the sense of, if somebody asks a question if somebody's new and asks a question that they're looking for help, I find in this space, typically it's not as, there's not many trollers, I'd say, in the fix and flip or on some other, for example, some Facebook groups I'm in. Somebody asks a question and people just, insult the person because they've asked this question and so forth, which was, a valid, good question to ask. But, people sometimes just are a little bit meaner, I guess. I mean, I've been accused of being many different things and so forth on people, even on Facebook and so forth. But it's more when people just, if there's 50 topics in one Facebook group on a subject and someone asks a question, didn't do due diligence to search, I'm going to let them know, hey, due diligence is important. And if you just would have done a quick search in this group, you would have got your answer instead of just asking an easy way out. But I'm digressing and I talk too much.
Yeah, I've used this. No, I've used the search function in Facebook groups a lot. I feel like you can find answers there. And like you said, there's a lot of people who are willing to help.
Yeah.
So I think it's more about being okay asking and knowing like it's okay that you don't know.
Yep. So what have you thought was a lot more difficult or painful that like you're like, this should not be this difficult, but it is? What do you think that is?
Working with servicers. Just, I mean, so my kind of like strategy was with the first few loans was to keep them at the current servicer that they were at, just because it would be easier. Like I felt like just that transition. Oddly enough, one of them I did keep at the prior servicer, and it wasn't a super smooth transition. It was one of my first, and I just felt like there was no communication, lack of communication on, again, this is my first, this was my first note with them. Like what information do you need from me? And I'm super proactive in reaching out. I want to make sure that I'm filling out all the forms that need to be filled out and doing what is like needed of me in order to board this loan efficiently and quickly. But I guess those two words with servicing just haven't really been like quickly and efficiently haven't really gone well. It's just been more difficult than I thought it would be. And part of that might be like, I didn't know when I was bringing loans from somewhere else what was needed. So I'm a very detail oriented, like systems, processes. I like those things. And so now that I've gone through it a few times, knowing, okay, this is what I need from the seller, this is what I need to get to the servicer. This is the typical time frame it's going to take. And I have my checklist of things that has made that process a bit smoother because I can be more proactive now that I know what I need. But when you don't know, I kind of felt like, are these loans even there? Are these being boarded? Do I own these loans still? Or so that was a little bit more difficult than I thought it would be. I'd say mostly just that. I mean, everything's difficult when you're new, but that would be the thing that I'd say was the least smooth.
Yeah. So servicers, one of the things, so I had always heard kind of nightmare stories about servicers coming into business. So that was one thing that people would always say is you got to manage your servicer, manage your servicer, manage your servicer. For me, I was a little more surprised about the quality of attorneys. And I just, again, thought like, okay, you're an attorney and it's kind of everybody's the same type thing. It's, here's your job. I thought it was pretty black and white. You do this, you do that, and kind of just follow a process. But what I found is that clearly is not the case. And, it's taken, 5+ years and I'm still tweaking my attorney list and so forth in states. And it's challenging too, because I had an attorney who was really good and all of a sudden they like fell off the face of the earth and now they're kind of not on my list anymore. And at first I was using them like, wow, they're really good, efficient, fast, and so forth. And then kind of like, what
Mm-hmm.
happened? And, one of them I found out had, some personal tragedy in their family and so forth. So, okay, that makes sense. But that's, for me, that's where I found, and then similar with title companies as well, and getting title reports, not all the same. And even, pretty much every company in essence is it's like ordering pizza. Some places are really good, but sometimes you get a bad batch, and some places are just awful, you don't want to use, and you're thinking, okay, it's making pizza, it's been being made for hundreds of years, it can't be that, shouldn't be that difficult, it should taste good. But that's kind of how I view a lot of the vendors. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
Well, I think I kind of skipped that because I just got a lot of your feedback and information. So
Cheater.
you had already gone through all the headaches and nightmares, and you're like, these are the attorneys that I recommend. These are the companies I'd recommend you get your title reports from. So maybe that would have been more of a headache, but I think reaching out to people who have been in the game for a while and asking what they do for XYZ helped mitigate the headaches there. Um, I feel like so far I've had great luck with attorneys. I mean, Alabama, the attorney is just awesome. I mean, he's great.
Who is it?
He's very Southern. He's very patient with me, and I've talked to him on the phone quite a few times. It's Brock and Scott,
Okay.
Wayne, Keith.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So, and that was, again, a recommendation from you. And I think something that we've talked about is when you're looking for a recommendation, like I want to know if like you've worked with them. It's easy for me to Google someone, but I want to know, like, have you worked with them? Have you had a good experience with them? Because that's different than you saying, oh, I found this, attorney in Florida.
So that was going to be my note and bolt, which every episode we do note and bolt, which is a little tidbit. That can be yours because that is so key that, like, I'll ask somebody, hey, you got a referral? Oh, yeah, I use this person. I'm like, have you used them? No, but I heard it from this person, and that person heard it from somebody. And at the end of the day, that person just found them on Google. And it's like, that's not what I want. I want somebody, like, I have the list from, I forget which servicer. Servicer sent me a list once. It's got like 8,000 attorneys' names on it from every different state. And it's like, somebody wants an attorney list. Here, I can send you a name of 8,000 attorneys, but guess what? It's useless because have you used them? And, anybody can put a list together and so forth, but it's who have you used? Who do you have experience with? And is it recent experience? Because an attorney from 4 years ago, I found, and any consultant may not be the same as they are today. So you stole my note and bolt. Thank you very much. I'll have to come up with another one from that perspective. So as we wrap up, what are some of your final thoughts in note investing that you could give advice to others? And then we're halfway through the year right now. Where would you like to be come the turn of 2022? You're like, oh man, he's putting me on the spot. It's 5 o'clock in the morning here.
Yeah. Things I've learned and things I would say to people who are looking or thought about investing in notes. It's definitely not something like a get rich quick. It's, I think patience is like the biggest thing. Patience and knowing that it's not, you're not going to make 100,000 in 30 days or 60 days or a year, maybe.
If you have
I
$1
think
million,
there's just
you can. But if you have starting with 50 grand, yeah, you're not going to double your money. If you want to double your money, go to the blackjack table or throw some money at Bitcoin and see what happens and close your eyes and pray. But typically, yeah, you're not going to, if you're starting with 50 grand, going to double it in the first year in note investing.
Yeah. And so when you're new, I feel like there's all, read all the books, do all the research. One thing that I think really helped me actually, and this is kind of not what you would think, but I think the turning point for me was one when I was listening to all the different speakers. I think you spoke actually at, what was it? Diversified Mortgage Expo. Was that earlier this year? Online?
This year
Was that last
the
year?
Cash Flow Expo. Diversified was last year.
Okay, one of the two. I was probably listening to both. Um, the whole time I had been looking into notes, everyone was, talking about why you should do notes, why, notes are the best thing ever to invest in. I think you were the first person who was like, here are all the ways this can go sideways. Like, here's all the money you can lose on first, and these are all the huge expenses that you don't take into account. So it's really, I was like, oh, like I've been looking for this, like reasons not to do this. Like, how am I going to lose a whole bunch of money? Yeah. So, I think kind of like going into it with eyes wide open, or as open as they can be, of like all the ways you can lose money, and also having good expectations for like you said, like what are your plans for the next year? Like if you're in this to build a business, or like it's very different from like, here, I'm going to give Chris money and invest in one of his funds, because that's always an option too. I feel like people don't consider, like, you don't need to do the actual management of your own notes if that's like it's a lot. Which kind of
I find out with a lot of people who, okay, I'll buy a note, then I'm like, okay, I want to be a note investor, and then you realize how much money you have to spend, how much time it takes to scale, and then basically say, screw this, who can I invest with that I can go make probably more or the same and not have to do a damn thing. So
I think that's something. When I first started in seconds, I was working with someone, and they basically said that, like, let's give it 6 months and see. Let's take this in like 6 months increments and see if this is something you actually want to do, because it's not for everyone. And I got a lot of experience there, and it was, they were so right. Like 6 months, like buy a note, go through the process, see if it's something you actually want to do. Because like you said, you can make the same amount or more and do nothing. So I'd say those things, and just like, what are your goals? What are your expectations with this? If it's to leave your job in, 60 days, it's probably not going to happen. So just realistic expectations and finding people that you can reach out to.
So you said
and then
50 by the end of the year, right? Is that your goal?
No. Oh my gosh, no. So it doesn't, once you have all the systems in place, like, and your notes are boarded and you're not continually buying, I feel like you're in a good, okay, now we just manage these through the process, go through, and it's like, you manage the attorneys, you manage the servicers, you're not managed, but you're keeping up. So I feel like I'm in a good place right now with, the little one's still home. He's 6 months, and my 3-year-old's at school. So it's more, I feel like I've reached my capacity right now with what I'm able to do with the time I have. Once, my 6-month-old in a few months goes and is at school, daycare, whatever you want to call it. I then feel like I'll be able to take on more. So maybe another, this might sound crazy, maybe another 5 to 10 by the end of the year. But I say that, but then we've also talked, this is the other thing with note, I feel like I found, is it's like you can get ADD so quickly with no investing, because you brought up partials, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why wouldn't I just do that? That seems like a lot less of a headache than non-performing. So, and I'm still trying to like poke holes in it. I'm like, tell me, like, I mean, I know a few, but so that's something I would like to explore as well, the second half of this year and moving into 2022. So that's kind of my rough plan, but.
No, and I like that, because what you hit upon is, and I joked at 50, and what you're looking to do is, instead of just going out there and just blow and go of getting a lot more assets, it's you're in a comfortable spot right now, and you're going to slowly grow, but you're also looking at other options and avenues to pursue during this time frame, to decide, okay, maybe I'll branch out and do a little bit of some performing and sell off as partials potentially as another strategy. So it's important to realize that because, with the non-performers, like you said, sometimes if you got a lot of them all at once, it can be overwhelming where, you could have 50 performing assets that are, in one non-performing, and that non-performing is going to take 10 times more effort sometimes than all those other performing assets. So no, it's interesting thought. And actually it's a wise decision to kind of try and play that, because some people also, when they get into this, again, this is very addictive business, by the way. People just keep going and going and going and realize, now what do I do? And then sometimes they get themselves in trouble.
Yeah, it's like some weeks I have no idea how I'm going to get everything done. And then other weeks I'm like, now I'm waiting on a bunch. So I feel like I could go maybe bid on more, but then I'm like, no, that's probably not the smartest thing to do right now. It's just, it's fun. I'm really enjoying it. I mean, I would not be working after my kids go to sleep if I didn't.
So, well, Lauren, I want to thank you for coming on this episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast. If people wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn or Facebook, or email me at lauren@rinconpartnersllc.com.
Okay, and Lauren is Lauren. I just want to.
Yes,
I've seen
Lauren.
Yes.
I've actually had that asked way too many times. You would, but I guess there's a few ways to spell it.
Well, a lot of people sometimes confuse the the male way of Lorin, because I know people like that. But yeah, I've never seen your name spelled that way for a female. But sometimes people, who knows? But yes, it's Lauren is Lauren's first name. Well, Lauren, thank you again for joining us, and for those listening, as always, go out and do some good deeds. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.